On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle. Hope everybody out there's having themselves a great day. Wanted to cover two kind of parts that have hopped up recently. There's no new posts that I'm aware of as of yet. But one, I had talked about this Class 199. Thought that was kind of interesting. Some of you may already know this. Some of you may not. Just going to do a quick discussion on that. And then I was really going to get into this particular Twitter post. Q has posted this individual, I guess, 3 times from some of the digging I've done. And I wanted to spend a few minutes on that whole topic. I think there's some awesome stuff in there. This happens to be an area I've been following and digging into a lot for many, many years. Not saying I'm an expert, but definitely saying I'm well-versed on a lot of the nuances, even from a spiritual standpoint, and it's definitely something that's very in line with my show. If you guys like what I'm doing, please subscribe, thumbs up, like all that stuff, and I appreciate it. The little bell icon's always good. All right, so Class 199. There's a lot of discussion that's gone around with this, but ultimately I believe, and I'm pretty sure this is exactly what they're referring to, and it makes a lot of sense. Q's been signing off with this Class 1 through 99 for a while now. Now, what this basically represents is all these different classifications. So Class 1 would be training matters, Class 2, neutrality matters, down to Class 99, which is plant survey. So he's kind of, I think, saying like from A to Z are all the places where these things are going to happen. Like we're covering it from A to Z. We're going to nail this from all the classifications that exist. Don't you worry. So I think that was one thing that was very, very cool is they're just trying to use broad strokes and to a large extent, I think, use terminology that's very specific to the government, which kind of helps out, I think. All right, so the one that I really am excited about talking about is this post 3949. And it's just a Twitter post, and we'll go ahead and hop to that. Oops, right here. And this Q, the Wake Up, has been posted a few times, I guess, or reposted, I should say, by Q. And the two that really jump out at me, these two up here are recent posts, so no big deal. One's this Twitter post specifically, and the other's something that's, I don't know, the kid that was from Rwanda, if I remember correctly. These two posts are really weird, way out in left field. Now, I love the fact that, one, Q's bringing them up from all my background. I love the fact that Q's bringing them up. And more importantly, we did recently create the Space Force. The Space Force is, for some reason, a new branch of military that we need. I say some reason kind of with a wink in my eye and finger quotes on my hand, but something larger has certainly been going on and allegedly been going on for many, many, many numbers of years. So the first question, post 2222, which is just a cool set of numbers anyway. Are we alone? Roswell, question mark, question mark. No. Highest classification, consider the vastness of space. Now, from just all sorts of different concepts, I mean, the fact that we're alone is something that I've definitely never believed. I mean, my entire life, it just seemed like a ridiculous thing. But I've studied it a great deal. I've gotten into a lot of very cool spiritual circles, and I've even gone down a lot of paths with UFOs, and actually had a man-made UFO fly over me one time in my life. I'm pretty sure it was a helicopter-type craft, but the noise it made was so bizarre. There was no swooshing almost at all. I could barely hear the hitting of the noise. So I think it was probably some sort of black ops copter. It was probably back in the early 90s. That's roughly probably what it was. But not like it was a UFO, but it was unidentified from that standpoint. But one, very cool. So we've talked about this whole Are We Alone? So it's just the concept of trying to expand people's thinking to the fact that there's quite possibly other beings from other worlds, other star systems, maybe just other beings, other species of Homo erectus, or at least walking upright type people. Obviously not Homo sapien, because that's our classification, our phylum, kingdom phylum classification, genus species. But the fact that there are very likely other bipedal, other creatures that exist, that are intelligent, that we can communicate with, and in a lot of cases, I guess they communicate telepathically. So there's a lot of very interesting information that ties in around that whole concept. All right, so 2222. Interesting that he's, sharing that. Let's go ahead and check out 2225. Did NASA fake the moon landings? Have we been to the moon since then? Are there secret space programs? Is this why the Space Force was created? False. Moon landings are real. Programs exist that are outside the public domain. Once again, outside the public domain. Consider the vastness of space, highest classifications, outside the public domain. One thing I want to kind of get into one is some of the reasons why, just to cover the bases real quick, why a lot of people think that the moon landings were fake. Now, there's a lot of things, but one, a lot of photos that are of the moon landings are most likely faked or at least done here on Earth. There's weird shadows and all sorts of strange things occur. So, faked photos for sure. Two, there was question as to whether or not they could handle the amount of radiation. It's suggested that the amount of radiation you'd get once you get outside the Van Allen belt is so large that it would kill just about anybody by the time, and you'd be, basically floating capsules full of dead astronauts around the moon and back. That's pretty bad for the public morale if you do those kinds of things. There was an issue with the technology, which of course I believe we can do. Anyway, long story short, there was all sorts of different thoughts around how we didn't go to the moon. What I understand it to be is, yes, we absolutely did go to the moon. Q's obviously verifying that. What I don't think people realize, and here's where my whole mind has always been, it's never been an issue of did we go there or not go there, which conveniently is how the deep state wants us to look at it. What is the case is, why did we fake photos? That's the question to ask. That's the question that I haven't heard asked a lot. That's the question I'm bringing up right now. And that's the question, I think I have ideas and understandings why. And it's why they think we faked it. But long story short, I believe we faked photos because basically when we got to the moon, we saw some crazy stuff. We definitely saw that we weren't alone. Definitely. One of the main reasons why, supposedly, we haven't gone back to the moon is because we were told not to. We were told, you best not come back or you might very well have problems. Oddly, Mars was much the same way. There's been a number of craft. The Soviets have sent a bunch. There's a bunch of ours that had failed. There's a whole slew of craft that failed. There's an interesting one. I forget the name of it. It's named after the moon. Phobos 2, I believe, was the name of the craft. And it actually shows stop footage of something getting closer, getting closer, getting closer, completely encompasses all of you, and then nothing. Completely destroyed the craft. There have been a number of places where we have experienced other beings in our system. Where do they come from? Well, from my understanding, there's actually a lot of places within our solar system that house these. Venus has supposedly some. The moon has a whole bunch of crap, especially on the backside of it. Also, supposedly around Jupiter and Saturn. I think Saturn's supposedly like the key of it all, but there's all sorts of moons, all sorts of stuff. There's moons around Mars that are interesting. There's all sorts of weird things in our solar system that we as people don't know about. So, huge part of why there's been all this question around what's going on at the moon and why we never went back until recently is because we weren't allowed. Now, supposedly that quarantine's been dropped not too terribly long ago. Specifically when, I don't know, within the last 3 years maybe. We now are allowed to go back there. So that's awesome. That's one thing. That's why a lot of this is being brought back up, because space is going to be a huge thing. Two, there is a lot of technology that people don't realize exists. Now, there has been sightings for eons and eons and eons of a number of different craft. There's been sphere craft, there's been cigar-shaped craft, there has been bell-shaped craft, and there has been this particular craft, this triangular craft. And this one has been named the TR-3B. This is, I think, one of the cooler ones. It actually seems to look like a real photo, but who knows? But this was probably early on. It certainly got that stealth characteristic about it. But the one thing that a lot of the triangle craft typically have in common is these weird lights in the corners. Now, supposedly there's some very cool advanced propulsion techniques or technologies that are involved in this craft. This stuff that's along the lines of mostly anti-gravity. I hear it's a percentage of gravity, but it's able to actually do some sort of weird thing with the way it bends space. And it's very, very fascinating when you try to read into people speculating or supposedly people that have worked on it and are talking about it. But that being said, there has been craft, and these things have been spotted for years. We've had a whole dark, separate space thing going on for a number of years on this planet that none of us have been aware of. Supposedly, Q is bringing it, and again, this is so large, this is so much larger to me than the whole Q movement. It surprises me, I guess, that Q is incorporating this. So I think that's super cool. But that all being said, it's being reposted by Q, And we've definitely had some suggest a couple different dark space programs. I think one that they suggest has been more by the Navy, and I think there's another one that's been more spearheaded, headed by the Air Force. The Air Force was supposedly more of the deep state stuff. The Navy was more of the deep state, or part of probably the industrial complex, or whatever name you want to give it. But supposedly is the one that's kind of sort of started slanting towards the Patriots, towards the truth, towards the light, towards whatever you want to phrase it as. So Q is bringing a lot of attention to these few areas. One, the classifications, which I would assume when you're talking about UFOs, it goes well beyond class 1 to 99. I'm sure it's FBI would never know. Probably, well, I don't know. Maybe there's people in the FBI that do. I would assume they have to. There's all sorts of weird cleanup crews, but I think a lot of this stuff has been off to other alphabet agencies that exist within the government. I don't think the FBI probably ever gets called on these types of things anymore. So wanted to bring some attention to it. There's a lot of really neat information around some of the deep space, or the deep state and the space programs, and some of the different planets we've supposedly been to, the possibility of there being door portals within our own planet that sort of go like stargates, if you will. There's a lot of really cool information out there, and maybe it's just crazy sci-fi, or maybe like so often, and like the recent video I did, a lot of the stuff that they hide in plain sight. They just make it look like it's fiction. And so most of us go, that's not actually real. When the reality of it is, it's a lot more real than we realize. Hopefully you guys enjoy what I've got going on. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And more great videos going to be coming as soon as I get some Q drops or some other crazy random idea pops into my head. Or if you haven't checked it out, the Law of One series is some very fascinating information that was put out by a group called the LLE Research back in '83, I want to say, when they started doing it, and some amazing channeled information about intelligences, densities, all sorts of very, very cool stuff. So if you haven't checked it out, certainly worth a listen to as well. Thank you so much for joining me. It is On the Fringe with Dan RadioStyle.